Sorry about before, guys. I had to go, but I thought I'd just quickly come back and have some more explanations of things. Very, very sorry about the fact that I had to go so quickly. Good to see everyone again. So we'll see where everyone is. You might be over at other scopes trying to figure out what's going on. Fun guys here. We've got everyone here. I noticed that I keep touching my chin. Sorry about that. I don't know why. Tanya, Miss Kasha. So yeah, I'll let you know what it's like. I actually think these type of places are safer now, and they've already gone through what it's like to lose their country. So you then sort of generate a new will to live, but it's never in the same way. A new alliance forms. So now in Lebanon, there's a very interesting alliance between different sects. Hey, Shamsin or Khamsin, welcome back. Your name. If I just realized your name Khamsin means 50 in Arabic. The serious face. Mehaba. Oh, there you go. Shamsin it could also mean something to do with the sun, but that wouldn't be Arabic then. Maybe Turkish or something. Yeah. So what? Very good. It's about time. What's it like, James the One? What is it like? Well, I'll tell you what it's like. Why I think Lebanon today is safer than Western Europe. Well, Lebanon is the future of the Khamsa is 5. Yes, well done. Lebanon is post-apocalyptic Western Europe. So if you want to know what Western Europe will be like, Lebanon's a perfect place. And if you go to my Twitter feed, you'll see the most amazing photos. You'll see remnants of civilization. You'll see a statue of Mary that's, half the size of the Statue of Liberty, looking over the blue Mediterranean. You'll see relative peace, the Venetians. You will see what looks like relative peace, but what happens is that the tensions are still there between secularists, communists, liberal Christians, right-wing Christians, liberal Muslims, Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims, Druze. Venetian is Phoenician. Oh, there you go. And you will see those. Freedom of speech is gone. Oh yeah, freedom of speech is gone. Yeah, freedom of speech doesn't last very long in civilizations. Israel will take over Lebanon. Well, they sort of already do in a way, right? I mean, they they pretty much dictate the narrative of what's going on, and many of the pro-Israeli Lebanese had to leave Lebanon during the apocalypse there, and a lot of them now live outside of Lebanon or in Israel themselves. Venice are time Phoenician colonies. I wouldn't be surprised. The Phoenicians dominated the Europe, the whole Mediterranean, and the Western Mediterranean actually until the Punic Wars, when Rome eventually, it took them 100 years, but they were able to defeat them. And in the Eastern Mediterranean, they dominated up until 385 BC, when the Byzantine Empire destroyed the cities of Tyre and Sidon, and I think executed 30,000 people under Alexander the Great. And that was it. Then they turned into a Greek colony, and they never really recovered after that. They just sort of fractionated into various little places around in North Africa. The capital of Tunisia. That's why a lot of Tunisians actually are Mediterranean. They don't look African. And I think 1 in every 17 people in Western Spain, 1 in 17 people on the Western Mediterranean are of direct Lebanese descent because of the the success of the Phoenicians. Well, obviously, I mean, that's how the alphabet spread and whatever. I mean, every culture's contributed something. Carthage, yeah, Carthage, yeah. Up in modern day Tunisia, are Lebanese Arabs mixed with Europeans? Lebanese people are not Arabic. Like, if you look at me, you can tell we're not really Arabic. We're Semitic peoples, just like most people in the Middle East before the Arab rampage. But there are more now refugees in Lebanon than there are Lebanese themselves. So you have, I think there's like the population is 4 million, but there are 3 million refugees. 1 million of them are Palestinian. The other 2 million are Syrian and that stuff. And of course, hey, welcome. Of course, they're going to hate what America's doing there, because America's now banning them from, or wanting to ban them from working with Hezbollah to stop ISIS from coming in. But without Hezbollah, ISIS is actually stronger. So it looks to the Lebanese like America is supporting ISIS from that side. So, you know, whether that's deliberate or whether it's a stupidity of the big bumbling white Westerner, as they like to look in the Middle East, who knows? But what's it like? So Arabs are only Saudi and Yemen because they are dark-skinned. The Saudis are Afro-Arab, actually. So what happened was the Arabian Peninsula and East Africa around modern-day Djibouti and Tanzania actually merged a lot with each other. And so that's why the Gulf people are Afro-Arabs. But the original Arabs, or Arab, are descendant of the Nabateans. The Nabateans were a small group in modern-day parts of Yemen. Yeah, some look African. Yeah, a lot do. Yeah, they're called Afro-Arabs, which is pretty cool. What a cool name. Anyway, so yeah, post-apocalyptic Lebanon, right? As I said, you know, 70s Lebanon was really the peak. 70s Lebanon was when every celebrity, the most famous celebrities in the world, would have to stop at Lebanon. It was one of those places that you had to stop. It was, as we said, one of the most advanced economies, advanced societies. And that may or may not be consistent with the fact that it was a majority Christian country or a pro-Western country, even though, you know, many people there were left-wing. So were the original Hebrews, like you, or Saudis. No, Hebrews, the Hebrew, I've done a DNA test, and genetically my genetics and the Hebrews are identical. But only 1 in 5 Lebanese share my genes. So the majority of us are in Israel, 1 in 5 in Lebanon, some of us in Syria, and then northern Greece and Macedonia, actually, believe it or not. Which probably explains 23andMe. African invasion caused dispersion around the globe to the colonies. You did a beautiful job on the drawing. Yeah, absolutely, mate. We're going to run an auction, actually, for so what's it like? Well, I'll tell you what it's like. Basically, you have free speech as long as all the doors are closed and it's only maybe someone you trust with your life. That's where free speech is. My cousin, who completed her PhD in political science, actually, thank you. Yeah, it is one of the most beautiful places on earth. It is. Just unfortunate that it's what do you call it? Beautiful country, bad neighbors. Palestinians, not necessarily. I have a lot of Palestinian relatives who are Semitic as well genetically, and they just look the same. But you've got, you know, a lot of those who have become Muslim have ethnically changed over time. Yeah. So for example, every single church in Lebanon, if you go to church, unless you're in some remote village, is protected by the military now. So all of this is, it's harder to deal with, but when you realize what's happening in Western Europe is just some naked woman walking into a jungle of highly testosterone charged 19-year-old virgins. They are constantly getting raped. If you know what I mean, that's a metaphorical term. I'm talking about the country getting raped by, you know, people that hate themselves. Yeah, you have armed guards in front of synagogues, and the same in Australia. In Australia, you've got armed guards in front of synagogues. Yeah, of course, in Egypt. The reason I use Lebanon, number one, obviously I know more about it than anywhere else, but it's also very close, right? It's only like my father, when he was a kid, was when Lebanon was at its peak. It was more advanced than almost every country in Europe, right? I mean, you had obviously the superpowers, but what has been happening? Hello, Cyanide, welcome back. What you have now is in Europe is exactly Lebanon in the 60s and 70s. So Lebanon was still the place to go, just like France and Spain are still places that people go. But there's now that hesitation, there's now that reputation. So your children and your children's children will laugh at Spain and France in the way kids laughed at me when I was a kid about Lebanon. I don't know if it'll happen faster or not, I'm not sure, but it's happening at a very quick rate, yeah. I mean, everything that I was predicting at the beginning of this year, I said would happen in the next 2 to 3 years, and it's happening in the next 2 to 3 months. So, you know, and I said that there will be the rise of, I said to people that Tommy Robertson is nothing. He is John the Baptist. He is warning people about the next person. Airbnb, yeah, there you go, Uber, Airbnb. No, Lebanon now is more advanced than, it's actually better than Western Europe now, Lebanon, because because they've already had the war that Western Europe hasn't yet had. So I'll be very clear about this. In my view, and I could be wrong, and I've said I could be wrong since you guys have met me, and I haven't yet been wrong. So I hope I am wrong about this. But in my view, Lebanon is without question the future of Western Europe after Western Europe has its civil war. So after Western Europe collapses into civil war, and then the war continues, and then you come out of it, that's where Lebanon is now. A fragrant flower and was a gift to the nations. I saw that, I said, I bet you James the One wrote that. It's a loop. Yeah, it is, and I've been saying this for a long time. As a kid, I used to say this a lot, and most of you know that the Aussie friends of mine were, oh, what do you know? Keep that shit over there. And I'm like, well, my friend, it's coming whether you like it or not. And the people who open the door to the barbarians are the fake leftists, the authoritarians, the ones who love the destruction of Europe. There are communists who out there who are happy, right? And you'll see this if you go onto communist pages. You don't have to trust me, just go on the communist pages. And here is someone who's a progressive. So I want Muslim immigration, but I would have wanted it in a healthy way. I would have wanted to help Muslims who are pro-West to come in and together to build a more beautiful place. But instead, total rampage in Europe. It's already happened. I don't think it's reversible anymore. I didn't think it was reversible 4 months ago. Now I'm about 90% confident it's not reversible. The only way out is violence. It'll get worse from here. It'll 100% get worse from here. Am I Australian? Yes, I'm Australian. It will not recover. What will happen? This is like I said, what happened in Lebanon. The communists sided with the Islamists, right? Now the good Muslims, the good liberal Muslims sided with the liberal Christians, right? So what happened was that we secular people, the senior of a civil war, sure. Basically, as I see it, well, I was there, right? So I can tell you, and I was there after the civil war many times. So I've seen Lebanon. Lebanon's now healed itself, right? But you never forget. You will never forget that your neighbor, right? Descend from the clouds and make it all better. Yeah, unfortunately, we're on our own. I was born here, but thank you. I was born here, but I was never treated as an Australian by most people around me. You don't forget, because even today, right? And I'm not even joking about this. Even today, there are people who live only 5 minutes drive from here, whose father and my father's father, right, were killing each other in the civil war. Right? That's what happens, brother against brother, and it'll be what you guys saw between Antifa and Unite the Right. That is a microcosm of what will continue. There is no recovery from this. There is absolutely no recovery from this. So it's hard to imagine, yeah, but it's harder to imagine, I guess, when you haven't gone through it. So I'm sort of talking to you like, it's weird. I'm talking to you sort of like the guy who's had sex 1 million times, talking to the virgin and telling you what it's like, and it's like it's hard to believe. For another country to arm one side in the US. Yeah, so basically, as I was saying, in Lebanon, the communists and the radical Islamists united and went against the secular Muslims and secular Christians, right? So basically, we all had to flee. And who remains? Muslims and fake left versus non-Muslims. No, it won't be like that. It'll be radical Muslims and the fake left against everyone else, right? But that's only the first part. The monuments were erected so we would not forget that it never ends. That's exactly right, Michael. That's exactly correct. All right. What happens is that it fragments in more than one place. That's what a civil war. Okay, yeah. All right. I'm gonna hide the chat so I can answer this question. All right. This is how it works. You have the authoritarian neo-Marxist fake leftists, and they hate the Western society. Okay. It turns out that the Islamic radical, only the radicals, not most Muslims, but it doesn't matter, right? The minority of it, the Islamic minority, also hate the Western society, and they actually have good reasons based upon their viewpoints. If you hold their viewpoints, then you will hate Western society. So that part is understandable. It's not justifiable, it's understandable. Okay, so those two will unite and begin their war. They will begin their war through indoctrination, inculcation, and then violence. And that started in Lebanon in the 40s. So Lebanon from 1893 until the 40s was almost completely Christian, Western, had its normal left and right. You know, me, I'm just a left-wing guy. You know, some of my cousins are hard-ass right-wing, right? But we all love each other, but we make fun of each other. You know, the normal, what you would expect in an open democracy. But obviously there was tension because of our neighbors. Okay. 1940s, the attacks start. Just like in the West, they started in the 90s. So the West is about 50 years behind us, okay? The attacks started and started and started and started and kept going until 1958. 1958 was the first leftist / Islamic radical uprising. So 1940 until 1958, 18 years of terrorist attacks, and then we had the uprising. The uprising would be similar to the uprisings you're getting now in Western Europe maybe 10 years ago. 10 years ago you guys started to have your uprisings. Okay? So 10 years ago was Lebanon, 1958. Right? By then it was still the Paris of the world, the jewel of the East. Every celebrity in the world would go there, you know, parties all night, all day. That was all still the case. Okay. 1958, around there my dad is now a child. So my dad is a child during the first uprising. So my dad is the equivalent of someone being born in the 2000s. So probably like a Generation Z. My dad was Generation Z, right? Of that time. Okay, I'm going to hide the chats for another 5 minutes so I can tell this whole story, which I've told before, right? Okay, actually, let me bring back the chats in case. Do you guys want me to continue with this? Christian Paradise Lost. Right. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay, next. 1958 until 1975, growing resentment against Jewish Lebanese and Christian Lebanese. Just like what's happening in the US now and in France. Okay, exactly the same. Gad Saad, right? Jad Saad, you guys know him from Canada. He was a neighbor of my family. He's like about 30 minutes drive away. All right. His Christian brothers and sisters said to him, you need to get the F out of Lebanon because this anti-Jewish shit is getting pretty bad, right? So he decided with his family, I mean, I'm shortening the story, but he decided to get the hell out. All right. I think his mother and father stayed behind, I think. Or they kept going back. They kept going back, and then they were kidnapped in the end as well. Anyway, so he decides to get out. My father's sisters had already left. And they said to my dad, you need to get out. Because you don't have a job there, not like your other brothers. You need to get out. Now, by this time, my dad's bigger brothers had been arrested multiple times because of freedom of speech. So I'm going to continue this story because we've still got 24 people, so I'll continue this story. So because of freedom of speech problems, my dad's two older brothers were arrested multiple times on trumped up shit, pardon the pun, all right? And they were arrested, they were bashed, and then they were sent home, and no one knows why, that type of thing. And that continued to happen. All right, 1975, the communists, the radical Muslims, and the Palestinians who had now invaded Lebanon because they were kicked out of Jordan. The Palestinian the Muslim PLO extremists found affinity amongst each other. And they thought, right, excellent, now we can take over this whole Western society. So what did they do? In Lebanon, on your ID, right, everyone had an ID. And on your ID it says Gabriel Catholic, right? It says your religion on there. Okay, what did they do? They just started doing roadblocks in major, like say like modern day California, where there's a lot of, authoritarian type of people. They just started setting up their own roadblocks, right? Because they were now like 40% of the population. There were hundreds of thousands of them now. So together, they then stopped every car, and if the car had a cross hanging from it, they pulled out the people, the wife, the father, the children, lined them up, and murdered them. So it was a mass production line of terrorist attacks in 1975. So we've now reached 1975. Let me bring back the chats. Okay. Was this Liban? Yeah, it was Liban. So we have now come up to 1975. As you can see, right, now during this time, there was an argument about open borders, because liberals in Lebanon wanted open borders, and the right wing, what is Liban? What is Liban? Liban is French for Lebanon, because Lebanon was a French speaking country. All right, so we're now up to 1975, and at this point, open borders that were unregulated, as well as the communists, the authoritarians, the neo-Marxists, and the radical Muslims together had united to take down the western country of Lebanon. Yes, Lebanon equals Liban. Okay, we're up to 30. I'll hide the chats and keep going. Okay, so we've now reached 1975. 1975, as we said, they were now large enough. They were all together. In other words, in France, they're almost large enough, because you got the communists, right? The authoritarians types, the fake leftists, the extremists, the radical extremists. All of those together in France are a lot more than 10%, right? Because a lot of them are French nationals, like white French nationals. And that's the thing that the Lebanese didn't see coming. It was the Lebanese that turned on themselves. So the fake leftist Lebanese turned on all of us liberals and the conservatives and everyone else. And they united with the Islamic radicals. All right, so this began. So then we had terrorist attacks constantly from 1975 until 1982. And the world didn't know about it enough. But what happened was that some of the Christians who were getting murdered, some of them were able to get away, right? They were able to escape to Israel. And they got to the border of Israel, and they said, Israel, you have to help us. The Muslims are taking over our country. Okay, you have to help us. The Muslims are taking over our country. Now that's not exactly true, because it was the radicals, but it looked like that at the time, because these people were doing, killing people with Allahu Akbar and, all that stuff. And the communists were joining them, and they had their hammer and sickle, and they were saying, yep, we're finally going to do this. So then Israel decides to back its Maronites. The Maronites were the Catholics, the Christians, right, of Lebanon. So Maronites ran the country, right? Now the Maronites, they weren't innocent in this. So I'm not saying they were innocent. All right. So anyway, Israel, with the help of the Maronites, invaded Lebanon and took over the whole south of Lebanon, all the way up to its halfway point in Beirut, up until 1982. Okay. Duke of Hazzard returns be cancelled. All right. So far now, the Christian Paradise, Maronite. Yeah. So now is safer under Persian control. That is an interesting point. That is partially true. Yes, that is partially true. Yeah. All right. So now we're up to 1982. Okay. So I've told you we're now 7 years into the civil war. Okay. So far it looks like it is the country against the radical Muslims and the communists. So far, that's what it looks like. Okay, is a Maronite family. That's right. He's actually related to me, unfortunately. Yeah, same as Shakira, Gloria Estefan's husband. Most of the politicians in the US, the doctors, the lawyers, they're all Maronites. They tend to be that way. 1982 was an Israeli attack. Yes, so some people call it Israeli attack. Some people call it no more war with Persia control. Okay, so let me hide the chats again, and we're back. So we're now up to 1982. Civil war has been going for 7 years. It looks like it's only one party versus another. It looks like it is the radical minority alliance of, communist and fake authoritarian leftist Lebanese and the Islamic radicals against the Maronites and everyone else. All right. So the Maronites, with the help of Israel, take over South Lebanon and sort of bring back some sort of resemblance of stability, right? But as we know, when you fall off a cliff and you land on a rock, right, that rock's about to crack and you're about to fall even further. All right. So what happens is, this brings the rise of who? It brings the rise of the Christian dictator. The Christian dictator. The Christian dictator, the first ever Donald Trump, he was a very good looking, very charismatic guy. So he was basically if Trump looked like Obama, but a bit lighter skinned. That was the guy. And his name was Bashir Gumayel. Yes, Jesus. You know, when you make those comments and you've got that smirk in your icon, it is so funny. Oh my God. All right, my battery's going to die pretty soon. So I'm going to have to go in, excuse me, and I'll tell you the rest of this story. The new emperor of the Maronite Christian. Well, it doesn't end there, it gets worse. So excuse me. It actually gets worse. Excuse me for a moment. Okay. So that's the end of the first part. So as we've explained, we had these constant attacks and we had the civil war, to be technical. Yeah. So we have that. Okay. Now, let's hide these chats and start again. Okay. Now you would think that's great and making Lebanon great again. You now have the rise of a more confident right-wing Christian base style militia, right? You can call them the first ever Trump supporters. His name was Basha. Yeah, his name was Basha. So they were the Basha supporters. Basha Gumayel was his name. And he almost made peace with Israel, almost. But unfortunately, too many of a certain population in Lebanon, I won't say which one, you can guess, I'm hiding the chats, did not want him to make peace with Israel. And ultimately, he was assassinated by, would anyone like to know who assassinated Basha Gumayel? Who assassinated Basha Gumayel? Who assassinated the first Trump? Take a wild guess. Hamas? No. Muslims? No. Nasrallah? No. Nasrallah wasn't around back then. You're gonna shoot yourself. Communists. It was the communists. Well, probably CIA's involved, but it was the communists that killed him. It was the communists that killed him. Now, that's not the end of the story. Okay. What do you think happened when the communists killed him? Just think what would happen if everyone got rid of Trump, what would happen? Right? All right. So, a military group, right, that had been around, now were out of control. They were called the Phalange. All right, I'll tell you about the Phalange. The comrades did it. The Phalange rose to power. Now, the Phalange was the birth of the fake right. Hey, hello, human. All right, so this is for Miss Kasha now. I don't know if you can see what's going on here, but now it was the birth of the fake right. That was enough. That was enough. The right-wing Christians had had enough. After 30 to 40 years of killing, they had had enough. So what did they do? And those who know me, Liran's heard this story a billion times, and he comes right at the right time. What happened? The Phalange, right, in one night, with the help of the Israeli military, slaughtered up to, and for effect, I always give the maximum number, 6,000 Muslims. 6,000 Muslims. There was, according to some of the Israeli military, there was an inch of blood just flowing like a river. Yeah. All right. So this is why, even though I'm on the left, I keep warning the authoritarians that you don't know what you're messing with. You don't know what you're messing with, right? One night, 6,000, right? Bloodbath. Now, it didn't stop after that. So, okay. So now, so far, I've only told you about 2 sides in the civil war. But just like every civil war, there's going to be more sides. I'm going to hide the chats and I'll tell you the rest. Okay. So now, right, the Phalange come in and do their mass murder. Now, all the liberal Christians, okay, like, average, regular people, some on the left, some on the right, they're now in a mindset where they're like, what can you do? Nothing else has worked. For our life and our parents' life, nothing else has worked. What are you going to do? Right? So they let it go. They let it go. Right? They let it go. And that's what's going to happen. They're going to let it go. Right? But that's not the end of the story. Because they can't keep letting it go. Because what did the Phalange do? The Phalange then started killing people who even looked Muslim. Like, they went off their head. They went off their head. They started killing anyone who looked Arab, anyone who looked Muslim, any Christian who had a friend with a Muslim, like any liberal Christians. They just said, what did you call me? Did you call me a bigot? All right. Poof, there goes your head. That's what happens. So now we're up to the next phase. Ethnic cleansing phase. Is a Phalange let go of what? You got to hear the rerun, the massacre, the Islamic massacre, the massacre of the innocent Muslims. In September 14th, it took 2 days, by the way, for them to kill the 6,000 people. 2 days, 2 days, 2 nights. They shut off the media. Anyway, yeah. So, okay. So now let's move on to the next phase, Miss Kasha. So Miss Kasha, right? Your facts are jumbled. Maybe your brain is jumbled, my friend. Your photo would be consistent with that. Okay. So, where are we here? What year was this? This was September 1982. Okay. Crazy, huh? But your mother likes it, you foreign defector. I think you're confusing my mother with yours, my friend. If you can't tell the difference, then you really do have a problem. That's jumbling of facts right there. Strong with Iran. Well, sort of. There's a potential civil war coming. I want to hide the chat so I can continue my story, but I really want this troll to come back. Yours smells like curry. Definitely yours. No, you're definitely confusing that situation with perhaps your mother's asshole. I'm sure to you that looks like another human being. I mean, where are we? Look, I got to hide this chat for a sec. In the midst of heartbreak. Okay, so where were we? In 1982, we had this Sabra Shatila massacre. Okay, so now, Miss Kasha, we didn't no longer have the communists and the radical Muslims versus everyone else. Now we had the fake right that had risen and was now massacring everyone who didn't look like them, who weren't as right-wing as them. Okay? And what problem does that cause? Well, that causes a split in that party itself. So what happens now is the civil war has now spread into mini civil wars. So you still have one side, as I said, the originals, and you had the other side, but that other side now split in half. So the side that was left had now split in half between those who were liberals, who were more secular and less religious, and those who were the right-wing maniacs, who extreme right that we haven't seen in the West since the 40s. And they started killing each other as well. And so now the whole country was killing itself. Okay, where are we? Let us bring back the... Okay. Metal Melissa. No, that's all right. We can have some brain damaged people here. That's not a problem. We can support a couple. We're not completely capitalistic here. All right. It depends. If he gets boring, we'll block him. But as long as he's interesting, we'll keep him. What civil war is coming? Hezbollah is supported by Christians also. Yeah, that's a bit of a monochromatic view. Don't feed the trolls. The trolls feed me. Oh, you blocked him. That's a shame. Oh, well. Okay. So what happens is that then you now have, with just like the Titanic, as the Titanic was sinking, it then fragments. And so what you have is the... Look at it. Too funny. Okay. Where were we? Where were we? So, Miss Kasha, to explain your situation, to explain the situation, what happened to 1930s Germany? Oh, that's a good question. Who doesn't support Hezbollah in Lebanon? Half my family, and they're all Christian and they hate Hezbollah. The other half love Hezbollah. And Sunni Muslims hate Hezbollah. And a lot of secularists hate Hezbollah. And some of them fear Hezbollah. But we're changing the subject. All right. So, as we were saying, Miss Kasha, the civil war fragments. It initially starts with two parties. Christians don't support Hezbollah. Christians are not a monolithic block. Just ignore comments. Yes, I'm going to hide the chats again. Sorry. So as we said, to answer Miss Kasha, this takes a very long time. We are now reached the mid 80s, coming to the 90s. And that's when I was in Lebanon. And I, as a child, got to witness the Christian on Christian warfare. And as I told you, I was a kid when I saw the guy get shot in the neck. So I'll tell you about that day, if you like. Firstly, to get to Lebanon, the Shia, the radical Muslims, I should say, radical Muslims had taken over the airport. And if you were a non-Muslim, you could not actually get out of the airport into Lebanon because they'd taken it over. And in fact, my cousin's auntie, who went to Lebanon during the 80s in the Civil War, she actually went into the airport and had to wear a burqa in a Western country to hide herself to be able to get out into Lebanon. Now, my parents and I did it differently. We went to Cyprus. And if everyone knows, Cyprus is in the Mediterranean, very close to Lebanon. And then from Cyprus, we went by boat into Jounieh. Now, Jounieh is the city north of Beirut, which was a European Christian stronghold. And that's where that statue of Mary is, which is half the size of the Statue of Liberty, right? And you've seen it on my photos on Twitter. I released one a couple of days ago. Okay. So we get there, and we were able to make a trip to Beirut. But we went into the mountains where there's no war. It looks as peaceful. It looked as peaceful then as it is today, as it was before. It was just amazing. You wouldn't even know that there was a war going on, right? But once in a while, you'd hear a thunderstorm. And I remember I asked my mum, how come there's a thunderstorm but there's no rain? She said, no, that's not a thunderstorm. And they explained to me that that was a war. So it sounded like a thunderstorm. What's interesting is that then excuse me for a moment. My dad's getting upset. He doesn't like me talking about it. Okay. So, we were in the village and we're having a beautiful day, and all we hear is massive explosions hitting I thought it hit the window, but the window didn't break. and we looked up and we were already in the Olive Press, which was like a makeshift bomb shelter because it was half underground. And then I remember hearing screaming. So I actually stuffed up this story the last time I told it. I heard screaming, and my uncle had to hold down my other auntie. It was my father's first cousin's wife, because her baby was upstairs in the house, but we were all downstairs because she was upstairs sleeping, right? Because as we're having lunch and stuff in the shelter, they left the babies to sleep upstairs in the quiet, and they had to hold her down because she's like, my baby, and she screamed like I've never heard anyone scream before, because she was trying to run up to get her baby, but she could not run up. My uncle was holding her down because she would have gone out into the hail of bullets, right? So she would have killed herself going to get the baby. And what happened was, after that, my next memory of that situation is, after a while, the shooting, I'm not sure, there was a lull in the shooting. So then we went upstairs into the house, and my dad's uncle and my dad went out unarmed and started taking down a few of the guys who had come in with guns. And my dad picked up one of them and threw him off a cliff onto the ground. Like, my dad was a big dude. And they were able to defend in the end. Ultimately, then other guys came out and were able to defend our village from the right-wing Christians. So let me bring you guys back. Okay, thank you for sharing. Tell your father I told him thank you for your gift. Yeah, I think he's pretty pissed off. He's still going off. Why he tell people about this place? He caused problem for us. Yeah, so basically, but what's funny is that the right-wing Christians, half my family is from there, but those people, was the baby okay? Yeah, she ended up getting married and she's got her own kid now. She was gorgeous, man. My God, she was like 6 foot tall. Tell him I am coming. All right, so in each location in the country, people were now turning on each other. So it would be the equivalent, for example, of the US. Each state would have its own civil war after a while, right? So there'd be like a state civil war in each state. Yeah. Oh, no worries at all. No worries at all. So I don't see it happening in the US anytime soon, because you do need a big demographic shift. I didn't say I didn't support them. I said half my family doesn't. Just wait, it's not inconceivable. Yeah, with a demographic shift, it's possible, because people thought the same in Lebanon. You have to remember, in 1893, when Lebanon gained its independence from the Ottoman Empire with the help of the French. Yeah, the Druze. That's a whole different situation with the Druze. To quickly answer that one, I think Jewish democracy is quite strong, but who knows? Yeah, you need a demographic shift for that to happen. Yeah, and it's the same thing as I was saying. They gained their independence, and it was, for all intents and purposes, a Christian Western country. I mean, even, for example, we had Monday to Sunday. Do I support Hezbollah? I'm not a supporter or not a supporter. I'm an understander. That's what I do. If you guys have known me from before, I don't. Did you get to Walid Jumblat yet? No, I'm not going to get to him directly. But and as you guys know, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm not insanely against him either. Hezbollah protects Lebanon. Do you agree? It depends what you mean by Lebanon. I know that you're pro Hezbollah and pro Persia, but and a lot of your points are valid. But I don't want to get into that right now, because I've got to answer Miss Kasha. I'm determined. As much as all your questions are awesome, we might have to do another scope on Hezbollah. All right, so getting back to the militia protects Liban. How old am I? I'm 36. All right, so nearly 37 actually. What was I going to say? Each party devolves. So to give you an example, Ms. Kasha, if you look at Geert Wilders, for example, right? Yeah. There are people who, I'm going to hide the chats again. There are people who support Geert Wilders, right? Because they are absolutely mad, passionate to support Geert Wilders, because they're like mad, like nationalist, right? Okay, that's one. Now there are others who support Hayat Wilders, who are the outer ring, right? The outer ring support him because they're like, well, he's the only one making sense at the moment. If there was a civil war in Holland, which I think will come, right? The civil war would be between initially those two that support Geert Wilders in different ways. So you got the hardcore supporters and then the outer ring who are like, well, he's the only one making sense, even though he's extreme, right? Against the other people. But what happens is that inner and outer ring will then start killing each other, because after a while, those who are hardcore for Geert Wilders, some of those will start committing atrocities against other people who may or may not be guilty of something, right? They'll just start bring back Holland. They'll just kill everyone who doesn't look what is Dutch in their mind, okay? And then the outer ring, who are more reasonable, will not want to be a part of that. So then they will start fighting each other, and that's exactly what happened in Lebanon. So let me bring back the chats. Okay. Right will be my enemy basically before Islam. No, they will be your enemy after Islam. So the radical Muslims and the communists will turn on the Netherlands first. Oh, thank you. Depends on the room I'm in and how I hold the phone. Is that better? All right. And my hairstyle and the goatee. All right. I'm a cyborg. Yeah, right, Water. Likewise. We were having a civil war while you... So what will happen, yes, the radical Islamists and the communists and those who hate their own society in the Netherlands would begin first. And then the rest of the country would retaliate, but then the rest of the country would then fight amongst itself. Now, how did the war end in the end? I'll tell you how the war ended, and this is why people don't recover. Here is how the war ended. They already did. That's exactly how the war ended. The war ended in Lebanon by changing the constitution. The war ended in Lebanon by changing the constitution. So the law before, exactly, that's how the law changed. That's how the war changed. The war changed. The war ended because they changed the constitution. So, yeah. So the constitution changed in 1991. And from then on, the powers went to the prime minister, who had to be Muslim. You mean the Druze massacre? There was a Druze and Christian massacre in 1860, which led to the independence of Lebanon in 1893. But I don't want to get to that. When I say independence, it was called a mutasarrif at the time. All right. So what they did was they made a new law. I'm going to go back to hiding chats. They made a new law, right? They rechanged the constitution so that half of the seats in the government had to be Muslim, and the other half were for the Christians. So that was the first thing they changed. Before that, it was majority Christian, right? But that's what happens. You have a demographic shift, you have reproduction, you have increase, you have that, and you have the whatever. Then the president was still a Christian. So the president of Lebanon was still a Christian, so that didn't change. But most of the powers that the president had then went to the Sunni Muslim prime minister. So the prime minister by law has to be a Sunni Muslim. Okay? And they tend to be very close with Saudi Arabia because they both have the same religion. Right? Okay. So that was how the law changed. And then 8 years later, they had something called the Ta'if Accord with religious agreements, etc. Okay. So now in post-apocalyptic Lebanon, where are we? Right? Oh, by the way, just one more thing about the end of the war. The end of the war, actually, there was something worse that happened. Sorry, let me bring back the chat. Miss Kasha, there's another thing that happened after the end of the war. Right? Where is she? Yeah, she's still here. Okay, so at the end of the war, Lebanon was then taken over by all the other countries because it had been killing itself. It was now not able to protect its borders at all. So it was then taken over by Syria and then by Israel. And then it got even worse because the dictator of Syria then started taking all of Lebanon's natural resources. They started allowing only pro-Syrian people to run their excavations, and then the Syrians would just pour minerals and materials and water and natural resources all out of Lebanon, because Lebanon is one of the most beautiful natural resource places in the world. You know, water, food, rain, sun, mountains, snow, um, rocks, gold, all these things. It's so basically the country lost its right to defend itself, its ability. It was a nothing. It's like a human with no arms and no legs. Okay, so now in post-apocalyptic Lebanon, what's happening? Well, Lebanon has now risen again, but it's risen in a different way. So now Lebanon is majority Muslim, 30% Christian, even though 90% of Lebanese are still secular Christian types, but they live around the world. They don't live in Lebanon anymore. So there's 9 million in Brazil, there's like 7, 8 million in the US or whatever it is. There's like, I think 100,000 or 1 million in Germany. And they become unbelievably successful, as Maronites do, just like Jews, because they're genetically pretty similar. And then they send money back to the churches in Lebanon and stuff like that. Like Carlos Slim, even, who's an atheist, sent money back, sends money back to the Maronite churches. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, now they're trying to make this new secular Lebanon, which is, I guess, a nice thing. And there's always that tension. There's always that tension that, Miss Kasha and your neighbor down the street, you shot at each other. One of you killed the other one's cousin. Right? Everyone in Lebanon, Carlos is loaded, yeah. Everyone in Lebanon, right, has a cousin or a friend who had someone of theirs killed by someone that you know, right? And now everyone lives with that reality. So over there, it's actually really peaceful, believe it or not, because of this new rise of secularism. And stone to defend myself, yeah. Oh, you'd get weapons pretty quick. Amateur that in Europe. So that's the story. So now we live in a post-apocalyptic Lebanon, which has rebuilt itself. But there are new powers. It's no more a Christian-based country, which a lot of people say is a good thing. Now, I don't say good or bad, right? What religion were the pre-Muslims? There were many Jews, Christians, and Wathaniyin. Wathaniyin were polytheists. Yeah, so the idea of Holland being Holland as it is will not exist. I will tell you 99% it won't exist. So there are still people in Lebanon who love the old Lebanon. It's nice there. It is beautiful, yeah. The old Lebanon still exists, but it exists in pockets. So just like, like for example, in France, there are still parts of France that you can go to, still parts of the UK you can go to, but London is finished. They were actually pretty damn intelligent, the polytheists. They invented quite a lot of stuff. Like, yeah, it's indoctrination that kills people, I think. Anyway, so over there now you can go to London is finished. Well, London is majority anti-West now. People who want to dissolve the country itself. Yeah, idolatry is big business. Okay, it's a horrible scenery. Well, through the scenery you get peace. If you're on my Twitter feed, I don't think you are, but if you are, you'll see the photos I send you. And there are more Muslims. There are more Muslims who visit our statue of Mary, right? There are more Muslims who visit our statue of Mary in Lebanon than Christians. Is my family Christian? It's a mix. I've got Orthodox Christian, Maronite Christian, atheist, secular, Palestinians. What would you do if you lived in Europe in a moment? To you, I would leave. I would 100% leave, only because I know what it's like. I've seen it happen, and everything there is happening exactly the same way, so I would leave, yeah. I would 100% be leaving Europe right now. Yeah. Sorry to disappoint you. Yeah. Maronites centered on Mary. Yeah, well, I mean, they don't like me very much because I don't believe, so they're not but you know, it's all good. Yeah, but okay. So we've told you all the bad news. I'm going to end on a good note. The good note. I followed you waiting for the Hezbollah scope. My friend, I tell you what, because you know so much about this stuff, if you send me some points that you want to discuss at Facebook /Gabsmacked, send me that, because you have some really good points and it'll make the discussion even better, I think. James the One, that's pretty insightful. What a surprise. James the One is insightful. So let me give you, Europe has too much, Australia is where it's at. Australia temporarily, yeah, maybe. I think Australia might survive all of this because we're very lucky in Australia. Australia leans much more to the right, I guess. So like I'm like a radical leftist in Australia. The new constitution online. Yeah, just type in Lebanese constitution. But if you go to Wikipedia, everything I told you is in Wikipedia anyway. And you can go to the Britannica Encyclopedia, because I first studied this when I was a kid, injured in Barcelona, yeah, and there were Lebanese killed, and pretty depressing. So we're sort of like ancient, cynical, wise people who have been through all this. We are girt by sea. So the good news is that the West travels with you, right? That's the good news. The good news is that, look at us, right? I'm sitting here. I feel like I'm in exile in a way, being in Australia. Asian influence, massive Asian influence. I'm going to be an 80-year-old fighter, or is this now 2 years to 30 years? Very much like the Bible. I predict that it has already started, right? So I can tell you that compared to Lebanon, Chinese, oh yeah, but lots Vietnamese, Chinese. Yeah, well, we're getting towards some sort of global thing, and that's why we're having all of these crack-ups and violence, I think. But it won't be the same. I would say to you, Miss Kasha, that you're probably somewhere between 1940 and 1975 Lebanon. So Korean, you're somewhere in there. Whether it's 10 years away or 20 years away, I'm not sure, but it could even be 2 years away at the rate that it's been happening. I don't think it's 2 years away. I think it's a lot more than that. I think there has to be more attacks first. And there has to be more of a demographic shift, which will happen pretty quickly. If you have a group of 18-year-olds, by the time 22, they'll already have kids. Travel ban, good for America. Well, it's good for half of America. I have this feeling the speed is aggressive. Yeah. Yeah, there are people who want a demographic shift. So for example, the neo-Marxists, rabbits, the neo-Marxists in Lebanon are happy with everything that happened, because the Western supremacists were deposed of their power, and so they're happy with that. And that's what I mean, that the authoritarians and the communists in your part of the world will be very happy with the destruction of your country. Yeah. But what's interesting is Lebanon has now risen back to almost becoming a first world country again. Like it's already overtaking many Eastern European countries, the ones inside America. When will we be back to promoting Western civilization? There will be a big shift. There will be a big shift. So now in Lebanon, there's a lot of secular Muslims. That's one of the good pieces of news I wanted to tell you. There's a lot of secular Muslims, and they've learnt that you got to keep your head down and not be a fuckwit and try and promote some bullshit ideology, right? So if you have a friend, it has now in Lebanon, it's very, very wise Lebanon prospering. It's prospering. Well, the Lebanese people are pretty industrious and pretty intelligent, and most of them are outside sending money back in and stuff like that. And other people have different reasons, which I won't get into at the moment, like with religious stuff. But it's now not fashionable to be an extremist in Lebanon. So that's one of the good things that came out of the war, right? And that's something that the Western Europe does not yet have. Yeah, Germany will collapse. Yeah, no question. It won't be. When I say collapse, it's not going to cease to exist, right? Is alive, that means Lebanon is not where it should be. This is exactly correct. Liran is dead on. Hezbollah is an indication of what Lebanon is lacking. Germany's a wrap, yeah. Well, you guys also have to remember that Germans emigrated to Germany from modern day Russia 6,000 years ago. So Germany was not always in Germany, right? So human civilizations move with you, right? So once you guys all move to Poland, or you move, all will become Islamic dominated temporarily, sure. Temporarily, sure. Yeah. Or even before Prussia. So Prussia was Germanic in terms of ethnicity. Weak compared to Hezbollah. Yeah, that's right. Lebanese army is a joke. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're done. But as I said, the good news is that now it's not popular at all to be an extremist in Lebanon. In Lebanon, you will not see many hijabs. You will almost never see the burqa except in some very small places. Yeah, and the war did that. I think the war did that. So the radical Lebanon is closer to Arab culture or Persian. Lebanon is not homogenous. So the Maronites are very European, whereas the Shia are very Persian and the Sunnah are very Arab. Germany will no longer be. Why would Germany take so many? Well, it's the same thing, because people want the destruction of Germany. That's exactly what happened. So we're done, man. I think I have exhausted the situation here. And I've given you some hope on the other side that you won't have many extremists left. So even most Muslims in Lebanon will not tolerate extremists. Oh, it's a pleasure. Yeah. Merkel does it on purpose. Yeah, of course she does. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm sorry I went so long. I didn't talk about a lot of topics. We didn't talk about Hezbollah. We didn't talk about the Druze. But, you got my... Oh, extremist, you are wise, master. Likewise, thanks to you guys. Oh, well, fingers crossed you guys can learn from this. And then now Scott joins. So, at Gabsmacked, remaining silent is never an option. All the best.